Hello, I'm really sorry that I can't be with you today. The good news is that I'm feeling a lot better. The bad news is that my son has a stomach bug. So I'm recording this from home. If you hear snoring, my dog is asleep on the couch next to me right now. I wanted to take a few minutes to go over the research project that we talked about last class period, and then I'll make a separate video to talk about Sense and Sensibility and get you guys started on a review for your test. So last time we talked about the research project, but I don't think I went over this particular file. It is, as you can see, under Unit 8 on OneNote, and it is your statement of assignment, and talks again about the critical concerns of the Sisters of Mercy, and the fact that that is your jumping off place for your topic selection, and it really has been a central force in guiding all of the topics that we've talked about this school year so far. Your audience for this paper is the community of Assumption, so think about peers, but also teachers, administrators, parents, things like that. We talked about the different sections that you'll need to include a little bit in class, but just to elaborate on that, you basically have 5 sections to this paper. An introduction, a section where you talk about the local perspective on the issue, so that's the more community-based concern. Then a section where you talk about the broader perspective on the issue, a national or international perspective. You need a section for counter-arguments. You definitely need to include some counterclaims. That's something to keep in mind as you are finding sources. You also need to make sure that you refute those counterclaims in your paper somewhere, well, really in your counter-argument section. And then finally, of course, you'll need a conclusion. The order or organization of these sections can vary depending on your topic. Obviously, everyone's going to start with an introduction and end with a conclusion. The local and broader perspective should probably be back to back, but which order you choose to put them in might depend on which section is stronger and the way that you want to approach the issue, the way that things sort of just materialize as you're researching. Is this something that you started researching because it affects us locally and then you got a bigger view on it? If so, then you probably want to go local first. Is this an international issue, but you wanted to see what its effect on the Louisville community was, and so you started big and then went small? The order of those 2 sections is up to you. Counter-arguments can either go right after the introduction or right before the conclusion. They shouldn't be anywhere else. For most people, it's really good to put them right before the conclusion, because what that allows you to do is it allows you to really make your full argument, then say, hey, here's what the other side has to say about this, but they're wrong, and then it gives you that chance to just come back with your conclusion and recap your main points and hit it home one more time, make that call to action at the end. So that format tends to work well for most people. However, there are cases where counter arguments would go better toward the beginning of the essay, like right after your introduction. And this would be when your topic does not seem very argumentative. If your topic seems kind of obvious, like this probably won't be a topic for anyone, but if you were talking about the heroin epidemic and the fact that we should take measures to stop heroin abuse, this is obvious that we should stop people from dying of heroin overdoses. It's very obvious. So in order to have a paper that has an argumentative feel to it, that feels like a real argument, you would need to introduce those counterclaims a little bit earlier, like maybe right after your introduction, and say, hey, here are some of the barriers to people getting treatment. Here are some of the conflicts over which laws to initiate, so that there's a chance to sort of make it sound argumentative or make it sound controversial. because sometimes that controversy is not obvious right from the start. So if you have one of those types of topics, I would say counter arguments closer to the front of the paper, but in most cases, it's going to come right before the conclusion. So I go into a lot more detail here about organization and length. You can read over that on OneNote at your leisure. And you need a bare minimum of 8 sources for the paper. 8 is the number that you need for your annotated bibliography. I think by the time most of you are finished with the research process, you'll have more, but 8 would be the minimum. And I talk here about giving you actually a major category grade on some checkpoints, actually having you write the local section and giving you a grade on it and giving you some teacher feedback. And then you would have a chance to change it and improve it before you turned in your final draft, but you would actually be graded on the draft that you turned in earlier too. And that final paper is a full 200 points. Several people expressed concern over notes. Notes will be required. Notes will be graded. They will, however, be a minor category grade, and I really am checking for completion. So with your 8 sources, you need a minimum of 5 notes per source and a minimum of 50 notes total. So obviously, if you have 8 sources, 5 notes per source gives you 40 notes. You're going to need to throw in a few extra somewhere to get that up to 50. You may have more than that if you like. In fact, a lot of you probably will have more than 50 notes. That's just a minimum. A note can be a direct quotation that you plan to use in your paper. It can be a paraphrase of something that was said in one of your sources, or it can be a summary of something that was said in one of your sources. With your notes, I am going to be flexible on the formatting for you to turn those in. Some people like doing actual index cards, and I can work with you on that. I'll just need to check those in class and hand them right back to you for you guys to take home and write your papers from. I'm hoping that some of you will do them digitally. You can literally just type them all up and print them to OneNote. I am even open to taking articles that you have printed to OneNote and annotated with some sections highlighted for direct quotes and paraphrase or summary written in the margins. So I'm going to be fairly flexible on the formatting, but I do want to see the notes that they are getting completed because it is an important step in the research process. My one reservation or kind of warning would be just to make sure that you're not doing too many direct quotes. You don't want your paper to be quote after quote after quote after quote after quote, so you really do need to be paraphrasing and summarizing a lot. If what I see in your notes is just a whole bunch of highlighting and not much else, that's not going to receive full credit. So that would be a word of caution. So this information is here under Unit 8 now. We did already talk about topic selection, and you guys should be working on that for me if you have not already completed it. Last class period, we went over guided notes. If you missed it, the guided notes on the new MLA 8th edition are posted on OneNote, and there's a link to the Prezi right there. I've also given you guys a citation maker, which is a place to write down all the information you'll need to create a citation for each of your sources. And I've provided a rubric for your annotated bibliography. Your annotated bibliography needs to have a total of 8 sources. The idea is that most, if not all, of these 8 sources will be used in your final research paper. If one of those sources you end up not using in the final research paper, that's okay. If you end up adding a couple of sources before you get to the final research paper, that's okay too. But the idea is that the majority of what's in your annotated bibliography will also end up in your research paper. But certainly we can give or take a source or two, no problem. You do need to have at least 8 sources in your final paper though. So the first thing I'm looking for is variety. I do want you to include 4 articles, ideally 4 academic journal articles from either the Gale databases or JSTOR, which we looked at through Louisville Free Public Library. So ideally journal articles, but if you're not able to find things in academic journals, certainly reputable newspapers like the New York Times, the London Times, things of that nature would absolutely be fine to use for articles. Then you need at least 2 other sources. And other could be something like a documentary film, a personal interview that you conducted with someone who is affected by this issue. It could be a government website. It could be, just any number of things that you are able to find in that other category. So that's a total of 6. So the other 2 can go either way. They can be articles or they can be other types of sources. So, I mean, what I would think would be a beautiful variety if someone were able to do, maybe 4 journal articles, 2 newspaper articles, a government website, and a personal interview, that would be just an excellent variety. I do want to see that already as you're looking at your sources, you're looking at getting both the more local perspective and a more broad perspective, looking at this issue on different levels. And you also want to try to plan ahead and make sure that you are finding some sources that are going to provide counter arguments for you as well. The diction and surface errors comes in because you're not just doing an MLA citation like you would for a Works Cited page, but you're also writing several sentences about how you would use this source, what information this source provides, how you would use it in your paper, and why you chose it. So for some of those sources, Ms. Lasley did offer this list of reputable websites. She went over it with you together in class, and this is where you're going to find some of those other sources. Also, a good place to look for some of the more local sources with some of these links, okay? So here is a copy of that information that Ms. Lasley provided, and it is linked up at the top of the page so that you can get active links. Here is a copy of your passwords for research, and here is a tips sheet for your annotated bibliography. And again, I've included a link here so that you can actually open this up and type into it, because that would actually be my suggestion. A lot of people seem to have trouble with hanging indents. I don't know why, but of course, bibliographies and works cited pages require a hanging indent, and for one reason or another, many students struggle with them. To create a hanging indent, what you need to do is click Control-A to select all in Microsoft Word. You're going to make sure that you have the View Ruler button on, which I do right now. It's being hidden right here by my recording device, but I do have it on. And then you play with the tabs, and what you want to do is drag it over. And I find it very hard to drag the bottom one without the top one. So I usually just pull them both over about 1/2 inch, and then I take the top one back. And there's my hanging indent. That's what you need to do. Some people try and they can't get it to work. So if that's you, save this Word document, and you can literally just type it into it, and the formatting is there. Just make sure that you delete my information. So these are just some tips about your annotated bibliography, what it's going to need to look like, what you need to include, how all of that works, okay? So you have a copy of that now as well. So that's sort of an overview of the information that we went over last class period. And I'm going to stop here and then come back with some information on Sense and Sensibility in a separate video, since you are actually preparing for a test next class period.